Hi, my name is Suzanne Moore and I'm a real estate broker here in Key West. I've also been a resident here on the island for 31 years and I'm the Realtor Political Action Committee Chair for the Key West Association of Realtors. Over the last 3 weeks, I have sat down with all 9 candidates that are running for Commissioner and Mayor. Why they should vote for Sarah for Commissioner this year? Why should they vote for Bobby Lurie?
Trying to bring people together.
What I have accomplished in 23 months, my opponent hasn't done in 8 years.
That's not factual.
Okay.
It's not factual.
I asked them all property-related questions, including but not limited to housing, property rights, short-term rentals, property taxes, the workings of the building department, and all things real estate. All these interviews are available on my YouTube channel, no cuts and no edits. If you'd like to watch these, just click the link below, and I hope that these interviews will help you decide who to vote for in the upcoming elections. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Greg Sullivan, who is running for Commissioner, and he's actually running for Commissioner in my district. So I'm very interested to hear what he has to say about lots of things to do with home ownership, property rights, short-term rentals, taxes. And so welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. My name is Greg Sullivan. I've been in the Keys for over 32 years now. And I am excited about this race. I feel very confident about it, and I'm passionate about the city. I've been involved in politics because my day job at Waste Management is working with the city and the commissioners. So I'm pretty well versed in what goes on in City Hall, and I really think that we need to have someone like myself that's a worker, not a politician, and I want to get things done for the city of Key West and the citizens of Key West. So, Suzanne, you have some questions? And
Yeah. So we're going to start off with some questions about property rights. So Key West has very little land remaining, as we know. If we're going to create additional housing, where do you think it should go? And should the city prioritize redevelopment, increase density in certain areas, or adaptive use? Like, where do you see, how are we're constantly talking about affordable housing, but we really don't have a lot of room. So what are your ideas for that?
Well, excellent question, and there's a couple of parts to that. So there was a recent article in the paper about the Publix redevelopment, and that there were no residents being incorporated in that building. But we don't have any more or very few B-Pass units to give out. So while we don't have really any land, we don't have the building permits to give out because we are an area of critical concern. So the one big area that I think we should really push hard on is there's 16 acres on Sigsbee Naval Base. And there is a big opportunity there because they're not regulated by the same rules that we are with B-Pass. So on that 16 acres, they could put a lot more housing. And currently there's an agreement between the Navy and Balfour Beatty, so those properties on Sigsbee can be rented out to local families. You do not have to be a military enlisted person to be out there. So I want to explore that opportunity. And then, I think there are some properties around town that have been sitting vacant for years, and I'd like to explore the opportunity to reach out to those homeowners and say, hey, what can we do to revitalize that house? I know down the street from me on Stevens Lane, there's a property, it's a triplex, and it's been vacant for 15 years.
Yeah, so maybe just adapt the use to something that's a little bit more usable for our housing.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think is just to go back to the Navy, because that's sort of something unique that you've talked about. What do you think the problem is that we haven't done that before?
Well, it's bureaucracy, and I think that we have to get the right people involved, through congressmen and senators and those kind of things. And my approach is to sit down and work with those folks, not go up there and protest in front of their houses, because I think that gets nowhere. I think, the right approach, we're making great progress right now. We have some new lobbyists. And that's key, is the lobbyist can help us through those doors to get those things.
So good relationships with Tallahassee is so important?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Some of the residents have said to me that we've spent millions of dollars on affordable housing projects over the last 5-10 years. We have lots of projects that have happened that are successful, but some of them maybe are not full or completely utilized. Do you think that there's anything that we can do, because there's such a gap between the amount of money people have to make to qualify for these housing, so it's a shame that some of them could sit vacant. Like, what can we do at a local level, do you think?
Well, two things. One is I've had a conversation with Scott Russell, our property appraiser, and he is looking into a carve out. So take for example yourself. Let's say that you have 3 other houses and you're renting them out.
Right.
You get 0 tax break on those 3 other houses. So he said he would work with me to look into some relief, because if those properties aren't what they considered being used at their highest and best use, which would either be could be a vacation rental,
right.
That you could, if you're renting it out to some workers, that you could get a property tax break, and that would also help you, because that also rolls up into your windstorm and your flood insurance.
Right. Do you think that has to happen at a national level, or do you think we have any influence here at a local level?
I think we have influence in the local level, because the county started to look into it, but they didn't press. Their need wasn't quite as bad as ours. And again, it's a Tallahassee issue. Plus, we're an area of critical concern, so we have that advantage and disadvantage to use for us.
Right.
So we can go to them and say, yes, listen, we're not Palm Beach, but this is us.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. So just to staying in that sort of the properties, the city of Key West controls its zoning and building height restrictions. Do you believe the current height restrictions strike the right balance between preserving the city's historic character and allowing redevelopment, while taking into consideration the climate adaptation? A lot of builders are saying now the new requirements are to build houses so high, and yet we haven't changed the height restriction. And that is something that can be controlled at the local level. What are your views on all of that?
Well, I agree that they need to be changed, because if the flood regulations are changed and the regulation to be above flood is changed, it only makes common sense that you have to raise the other one. You can't do one without the other. Right. And then in certain parts of town, like for example behind Searstown, you could go a little higher there. You're not going to change the character or anything. Of course, we don't want an 8-story building on your street.
Of course.
But in certain areas, they need to be reviewed and looked at with logic and common sense.
Right, right. So a little bit maybe changing in the zoning, the density, and those are things that you can control at the local level.
Right.
Yeah, great. And so the other question had to do with encouraging property owners to provide long-term housing, and you kind of hit on that already by trying to give people tax breaks. And we've talked about that at several meetings, but it doesn't seem to be pushed, so that they don't do short-term rentals and they could do long-term rentals instead. So
well, and to that point, my wife worked with some developers at the property here in town, and they built affordable housing, and they control it personally. So there are no AMRs and rent restrictions and anything like that. So their place is full, and the rents are equitable.
right.
And there's no big restrictions, because I know some of these properties, the restrictions that are on them make it counterproductive.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. We have some new realtors actually that are staying out on Stock Island on the development out there. And he actually said to me, he's like, I qualify now, but if I make too many sales in real estate, I won't qualify anymore.
I know, it's ridiculous.
So you're being punished if you do well.
Yep.
So it just doesn't make any sense, does it?
No. And when you put these projects together and you get that federal money in there, the regulations are so restrictive that it's counterproductive.
Right. Again, it's having great relationships with Tallahassee, so important.
Right.
Right. So we're going to move it on now to some one of the realtors' favorite things to talk about is short-term vacation rentals. And this is something that has been brought up to me on several occasions, because right now, as you know, Airbnb and VRBO are exploded across all social media platforms, and so more and more people are taking advantage of that rather than making reservations traditionally. But there's another interesting thing that not too many people are talking about, which I thought would be an interesting question. As more visitors are choosing to stay on boats rather than traditional accommodations, do you believe the city should adopt a policy governing short-term lodging on vessels, particularly located in city marinas or on city-controlled waterfront properties? And if so, what do you think those policies should look like?
Well, I agree, because you're a licensed realtor, so you do things by the book, and if you rent something out, you go through the procedures.
Right.
The homes have to have a fire inspection, and they have to be brought up to code. But we've heard horror stories of people, they rent these boats out, and there are scams out there. And for safety reasons, for our own PR reasons, the last thing you want is someone to fly out here, spend thousands of dollars, and get out and find that they have a dilapidated boat with no bathrooms, no showers,
Right.
no anything. So I think that the city should be involved and get some type of fee, and also make sure that those folks are pumping out properly
Right.
and disposing of their trash properly, and for the safety of the visitor.
And the environmental concern, of course.
Both, absolutely.
Yeah, a great answer. The number of short-term vacation rental license, the transient licenses, is now lower than it has been for years due to the expiration of the trim and annex transient licenses. In fact, they're so limited now that the market value of a transient license is about $500,000, which is hard to believe. Do you believe the city should maintain its current cap or expand the number of licenses in the correct zones that allow transient licenses, or should we reduce them further? Tell us what you think.
Well, I think the key word, and you said it, was zones.
Right.
So there are certainly areas of town where short-term vacation rentals are really the right spot to have it.
Right.
And in other spots, in Midtown, Newtown, you don't want that. So I don't know what the limit would be or should be, but it's something that kind of should be looked at. But zones is the key word there.
Right, because there's a whole section downtown right off Duval Street around Catherine Amelia that's full of guest houses. There's some single family homes in that neighborhood. Some have transients, some don't have transients. And the ones who do have transients are probably worth almost twice as much of the ones that don't have transients. So,
Right.
If they're in the right zone, and should they be allowed to have a transient license? So we're just, we're asking the question. Some people say absolutely not. And some people say, hey, that's a good idea. Let's have a conversation about that.
Well, I think it certainly should have a conversation. And then, of course, with that value difference,
Right.
those licenses should be renewed annually, and they shouldn't be a $20 license.
Right, because really they are selling on the open market right now for about $500,000. So
Right. So if you're able to take that business opportunity,
Right.
and then it's a business. It's not a house anymore. It's a
Right.
business. So then that should be reviewed and looked at by the city as a way to generate. So if you're going to get $5,000 a weekend for your home,
Right.
then you pay a little bit different tax than the worker.
Right, yeah. So we're just trying to see if that's even something that people are even interested in discussing, because there's a lot of people who say, no, we don't want to do that, A previous commission a few years ago proposed a policy that would have prohibited any future properties from becoming eligible for monthly vacation rentals, effectively limiting the use of the properties to basically the ones that already have it. You probably remember that a few years ago. There was a lot of discussion amongst the real estate community during that time. Do you believe in restricting future property owners in this way? Do you think it's a good policy? What do you think about that?
Well, from what I recall, it's kind of a slippery slope, because if we change any of our vacation rental rules, then they all go away. And
why don't you explain to the people that are listening about that? Because I don't think everybody really understands that.
all right, so it's a property rights issue. So right now, we're grandfathered into what we have. So we have a limited amount of short-term transient rentals that you can rent your property out for a weekend if you like. And then we have another rental scenario where you have to rent your property out for no less than 28 days at one particular point in time. So we are grandfathered in that they are allowing us to keep those rules. But the way the state looks at it is if we start to play with those rules and want to change them around, they all go away. And it goes back to, it's your house. If you want to rent it out for the weekend, knock yourself out.
Right. So us changing, or you changing, or the city changing those rules means that all the rules go away.
Right.
Everyone can have transients or not transients, and we don't have any peace and quiet in the neighborhoods anymore.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So again, we have to be careful.
Yeah.
How we go about it.
Right. Right. Regardless, excuse me, regardless of the number of licenses, do you believe the city is doing enough to enforce the current rules regarding vacation rentals, or would you encourage stronger enforcement, fines, fees? What do you think about that?
Both. A few years back when Mayor Enriquez was our tax collector, she had a very strong program, and if you had an illegal rental, you could call a number and it would get investigated. What I would like to see is that city code enforcement has 2 people minimum that are dedicated to code enforcement on vacation rentals. And the reason I say that is because, you know, one code officer can't know every code there is. They can't know electrical and plumbing and garbage and real estate. So take 2 folks, and that is their job. And back probably 8-10 years ago, they did that, and they researched it, and it worked very well.
Yeah.
And it kept people in compliance.
I think the fines that we have, though, are set by the state. You know, if somebody doesn't comply with the rules of short-term vacation rentals, if someone comes for a week and they're supposed to be here for a month, and they do get caught, I don't believe the fines are that high that it really prohibits the owner from doing it again.
Well, you're right, and it should be, the fine should be higher, and it should be, you know, 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing.
Right, right.
You know, and again, you're a realtor, so you work real hard to comply with the rules. So it's not fair to you as a realtor
Well,
that...
some people do always do the right thing. You know, I think the majority of the vacation rental companies here in Key West do really try to abide by the rules because their businesses depend on it.
Right.
But there are owners that are absentee owners that are sending people in, and they say they're friends or they're an uncle or an aunt, and then there's a rager party next door with 25 people, and the whole neighborhood is up. And you know,
well,
I do think that is certainly still an issue around town.
And the one thing that I mentioned at the luncheon, and I think that we should certainly do this, is they do it in Marathon, because Marathon has a horrible problem because they don't have a 28-day rule. That's why they incorporated, because they didn't want the 28-day rule. And now they're sorry that they did that. But what they have is, if you have a vacation rental, there's a sign out front, probably a 2x2 sign, with the vacation rentals manager's name and phone number.
Oh, okay.
So if you have a problem and you live next door and there's a raging party going on at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can call that person at 2 o'clock in the morning and address the issue with them.
Instead of the police department.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine they definitely didn't want to have the restrictions. They wanted the minimum 7 night rentals in Marathon. And a lot of investors like that because they can invest and they can make more money on those transient licenses. But it does have a detrimental effect on the neighborhood for sure.
Right.
I like the idea 3 strikes are out. I don't know how that would really go down if that, I stayed in a VRBO myself one time, and I remember reading the rules and had a transient license. They were allowed to transient license 6 months a year and then monthly the other 6 months. It was slightly different than what we have. But they have a rule that if they get 3 complaints to the city, to the central line, they actually lose the ability to rent, you know, which is a very, very strict rule. So
and I think
it's effective.
As you mentioned, I would have to say that 99 or 100% of the realtors in town work within the rules.
Yeah.
But when you have the absentee owners that are doing VRBO, they're the ones that are making it look bad for all of us because people don't understand that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So we're going to go on to another thing that really affects most homeowners: property insurance, wind, flood insurance. So property insurance has become one of the biggest obstacles to buying and owning a home in Key West. While many decisions are made at the state level, what specific actions could we take here on a local level as you as commissioner to help reduce the burden of wind and flood insurance for property owners?
Well, I think we have to do a joint effort with at least at minimal the county, because it's a big issue, and it's not only a Key West issue, it's a Key West issue, it's a countywide issue. So we have to corroborate with the county, go to Tallahassee with hat in hand on a friendly voice. Don't go up there pounding your fist.
Right. Yeah, we were thinking, is there any things like stormwater improvements or ease of permitting for, raising houses? There's a lot of proposals where we've seen even a few concrete houses that have been raised now.
Right.
And, again, we're going to get into permitting in a few minutes, but some of those things, working with firm, financially supporting firm, I know most of those things are done at a state level, but, there's certainly a few things that we can, keeping it on our radar.
Right.
And firm has certainly helped us.
Oh,
sure.
without a doubt.
Without firm, we'd probably be paying a lot more money. So Key West has experienced several intense rain events, as you know, that have flooded streets, neighborhoods. I think you've had some experience personally yourself. I know I have,
Yep.
Years ago. In fact, my office was flooded about a year ago in that big rainstorm. And we're in the X zone right here. So when
Right.
people say, I want to be in the X zone, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get water, right? So we had the big rain. So given the city's limited budget, what specific actions would you prioritize over the next 4 years to better protect residents and businesses from flooding? And how do you think we could pay for it?
Well, the flooding is two things. One is a hurricane and a storm.
Yes.
And that's
an act of God.
act
So we
of
can't
God.
really
You
do
can't
much
that.
about that.
But the other part, again, I go back to my background, is maintenance. So there's hundreds of storm drains and injection wells and all of those things that are out there. And I think we need to step up our maintenance program. I was on George Street just the other day, and there was a storm drain there, and it was completely full of sand all the way to the top.
Really?
So we have the system in place, but we have to maintain it.
Right.
And I think too many times, that's an easy thing to cut out of the budget or push to the side or move apart. So, what I would like to see is a plan in place for long-term maintenance. Don't just fix it today because it's broken. Maintain it every day so it works all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And you see them all around town, and there has been many improvements made.
Right.
But of course, if it's not maintained or if it gets full of junk,
Right.
then it's never going to work when
Right.
we need it. Yeah. We're going to move now to building permits, and this got a lot to do with the city. And I know that you're very involved. You go there all the time. You really know a lot about what's happening at the city. Do you believe the current ROGO and BPAS allocation system strikes the right balance between protecting the environment, supporting property rights, and the housing needs? I know we have a lot of limitations now with ROGO and BPAS allocations, but there's still, what do you think about that whole system that we have?
Well, because I've been here a long time, I know that when ROGO first was put together, it was supposed to sunset. It wasn't a perpetuity scenario.
Right.
The city, unfortunately, whatever, we're pretty well built out.
Right.
So, again, it goes back to the balance. We have to look at what we have, and the permits. It's very difficult, very arduous process to get anything done, and it's expensive, very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So I would be a proponent to sit with the city manager and say, listen, you have to develop a checklist so that when people go in, they know exactly what they need to do and they can prepare for it. Not that they go in and 2 months later, oh, well, now you have to do this. And then 2 months later, well, now you have to do that.
Yeah, so it kind of feeds into the next thing about the permitting process, because I work with a lot of builders and generally people that are buying a house, and they might buy a house for $1 million or $2 million, and then it has to be completely renovated. And the next thing, they're like, how long is the permitting process? And so and I've been doing this a long time. And I cannot tell my customers that it's going to take 3 months or 6 months or however many months, because while they do seem to have a lot of rules, there seems to be a lot of delays, and it just takes a long time. And sometimes people complain, couldn't get the permit, it took me 9 months, which seems completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
So, I know that, it's city manager's job, but as commissioner, do you think that it could be improved?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you look at, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
And I think that should be streamlined. And I'd like to see, again, going back to my code thing where people are in charge of that, going back that someone in the city could kind of be a liaison. Mm-hmm. So if you go in, you can say, listen, I have this property, this is what I'm looking at. And they can say, well, here's what the building's going to need, here's what Hark's going to need, here's what zoning's going to need. So here's the package.
Right.
And I think that would help the customer a lot. And then you would have an idea of, okay, I have to do these things. And then you could look at it and say, well, it's going to cost this much money. And maybe they, couldn't afford to do the deal. Or maybe they say, fine, and then you can move along.
Right. Well, yes, we've seen a lot of, with issues with the tree commission and issues with, code or something that's already been grandfathered in, or, because every single property in Old Town can't possibly comply to the rules and regulations.
I just talked to somebody today that there's a spot on Hilton Haven where there's a bunch of houseboats that are rented, mm-hmm. and the property got sold, and the tree person came in and he said to me that there was something like 80 trees there that were red tagged for removal.
Okay. And he didn't want that to happen?
Well, he's only a tenant there, so. Okay. He, along with 20 other people, are going to be looking for a place to live.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So it's really a lot of people we hear is, what can we do to ease? And I know in the candidates forum that you spoke at last week, you did mention trying to reduce the number of departments at the city to try to ease how that all works over there.
Right. And if they can't be reduced, then create a position that's a liaison so that when you go in, this person can kind of guide you through that.
Right, yeah, because sometimes it can be quite complicated for someone who's not from here or no
right.
connections.
Right.
So yeah. So I think that a liaison is a good idea for building over there. We're just going to move to the taxes, impact fees. So Governor Ron DeSantis and the legislature proposed significant changes to Florida's homestead tax system that could potentially reduce local government revenue if it's approved by the voters in November. So do you agree with what they're proposing?
There's a whole lot of information that's not being told out there. Mm-hmm. And I know that they're kind of backing away from it. At first it was going to be totally gone. Now they're looking to raise the homestead, I think, from $50,000 to $250,000.
I think yes, eventually. Yes, I know when they first proposed to eliminate the property tax, because I remember hearing about that. There was some backlash. A lot of local cities and municipalities said, we can't afford that.
Right, and then things like, fire and police kind of stay, they're safe. Ambulance, I think, is questionable. I know mosquito control is on the question block.
Oh, really?
So, can you imagine Key West without mosquito control?
No.
It would be horrible,
yeah.
Horrible. So, I think that, like anything, like I said, you ask a 6-year-old kid, you want ice cream? Of course I do.
Right.
But they don't realize what's going to happen. So, it has to really, really be researched hard. I know the city worked for a while with the fire department, and they were like, well, if we charge every resident $150 a year more, or $150 a year, then that's fine. But then the businesses get the burden.
Right.
So, how much burden can we put on the businesses before they
yes, and
can't survive?
And also, with if the homesteaded people get a break, then the second homeowners don't get a break. They're already paying
right.
extra for insurance,
right.
and I know that all of their taxes, of course, will go up.
Right.
So the city taking on major capital campaigns, so we voted for the bond. The bond got approved. And so now we have a future where there's a bunch of capital projects that are going to happen in Key West. And some people argue that some are more important than others. And some people say that, like our fire department, I think the number was the new fire department, $33 million, which is a substantial number. So where are we going to find the money for all of these things? And also I want to bring in, it's been mentioned that the city is sitting on $1 billion worth of assets, owns a lot of property in Key West. So how do we use that, or do we use that to help us fund other projects without raising taxes, without leaving us in debt for future generations?
Well, I've heard that statement, and while we do have $1 billion worth of assets,
right,
they're not assets that are going to produce revenue. City Hall doesn't produce revenue.
Right.
The wastewater treatment plant doesn't produce revenue.
Right.
Bayview Park doesn't produce revenue. So, that statement could be misconstrued.
Yes.
One of the places we have that's an asset that produces revenue is Key West Bight. So Key West Bight, I don't know what it's worth, but that produces revenue. But with that said, what we do own, we need to maintain it, and we need to have programs in there that maintain it. So, you can't have a program for Bayview Park for $200,000 and then just say, well, we want to cut, so we cut it. The grass has to be cut, the drains have to be maintained,
right,
and those kind of things. And now that we have Higgs Beach, I think there's a big opportunity for us there.
Well, I'm so glad you brought it up, because I have always been in support of Key West owning Higgs Beach, because
too.
I live in the neighborhood and I walk there every day with my dog, and I know that the city just had a big meeting with some of the locals and what to do and how to maintain it. So what is your vision, do you think, for Higgs Beach?
Well, I think Higgs Beach has a great potential. I know that there are some particulars that when the city gave up part of the BRAC property on Government Road to the airport so they could do their environmental mitigation, the airport was supposed to build a soccer field somewhere at Higgs Beach,
Okay.
which I think is great. I think the dog park there needs a total redo. It's been neglected for a while. And I've spoke to Marcus, and he's got some ideas on how to fix things. I know I spoke to our city lobbyist, and there's a large pot of money that we could acquire for beach restoration.
Right, from the state?
From the state and the federal. So my thought is, I want to get grants to do a project. I don't want to get a grant that is good for today, but then we got to pay for it the next 5 years or perpetuity. So if we can get a beach renourishment grant, or a grant to redo the pavilions, or a grant to redo the seawall, those are the kind of grants I want to pursue, because those are, I call them one and done. You get the grant money, you do the project, and it's done.
Right. What do you think about putting together a small group of people to kind of come up with the long-term strategic plan for Higgs Beach? Because there's a lot of projects there that need to be done, and a lot of money is going to be required,
right,
to kind of get it all together.
I attended the first part of that meeting the other day.
Yeah.
And the city outlined what their current plan is, which makes sense. Is they're going to take what the county's plan was, and
right,
the dollars that the county already has in place to do things. I think it was just shy of $4 million. They're going to get those things going because they're already in place.
Yeah.
And I think it would be foolish to let that money sit and not do it.
Right.
And then there was talk about adding some pickleball courts.
Right.
And making the dog park better. There's obviously some parking improvements that need to be done.
Can you assure the residents, because I go to the Sunrise White Street Pier.
Right.
And there is a bunch of people that go there on a daily basis. And when it was confirmed that the city was going to take over Higgs Beach, they were all out there wailing about how they were going to have to pay for parking to go to Sunrise at White Street Pier.
Well,
So
if the
can you
question was
please-
posed to me,
Yeah.
my vote would be for free parking for residents.
Okay.
So if you have a residential parking sticker on your vehicle or your golf cart, you don't have to pay to park.
Right. Not
You
the
know.
4 hours that we get downtown, but you think if somebody wanted to go to the beach for the day, they should be able to go to the beach for,
Go
the,
to the beach
day
for the day.
if they are a resident of Key West.
Right, right. And you know, then the question becomes, you know, I grew up in Long Island, out east in the Hamptons area, and you got a residential parking sticker for free.
Yeah.
And if you were not a resident, you had to pay to park.
Right.
And you know, I think that's fair.
Right.
Because if you're here on vacation or whatever, that's fine. We're glad you're here, but you don't pay taxes here. You don't pay anything, so you might need to pay to park.
Right. Okay. So I think that that wraps up the official questions.
And one last thing on
Yeah.
parking. I just learned this the other day, and I was amazed. Do you know what the city makes annually on parking?
Did I hear 9 million?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
9 million. Yes, I know. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
So speaking of parking, the proposed garage downtown that they're talking about, what do you think about that idea?
Well, I can tell you, I've gone to different functions downtown, and I've circled around and can't find a parking spot.
Right.
So I've got to the point now where I just take an Uber down there because it's easier.
Right.
But again, when they redid the fire station, there was supposed to be a parking garage put there.
Yes, I remember that.
And I know there was controversy, and it goes back to 15 years ago, there was a bunch of injection wells put on Simonton Street to alleviate that flooding problem. And with proper maintenance,
Right.
those injection wells would work fine, and we wouldn't have the flooding problem. Because I know the people were saying, well, if you put a parking garage, it's going to flood. Well,
Right. But
Not-
the
not
injection
really.
wells, yeah.
because I mean, you're not changing the footprint. You know, the square footage of what's out there
Yeah.
is the same.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Well, so, and one last thing, I thanks for answering all these questions. I think it's been very informative. Tell us what you do in Key West when you're not working and campaigning. What do you like to do when you're not, you know, in your off time, when you're relaxing in Key West?
Well, that's a good question. So, like yourself, I've been past president of the Chamber of Commerce not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a believer in the chamber because the chamber supports businesses, which supports jobs for our local folks, and it helps out. So I'm also on the board of Keats Federal Credit Union, again a local credit union and non-paid. I am the chairman of the Sigsbee Charter School. I got involved with that through military affairs. I'm also on their board, military affairs, which the military presence in the city of Key West is probably second to tourism. And, you know, I support our military. We wouldn't be where we are today without them.
Yeah.
So I believe in the military. And that's why I believe in Sigsbee Charter School, because you get these families coming down here and they have young children and they need a safe school to go to. So while mom or dad is deployed, their child is taken care of. And
Right.
Sigsbee Charter School, our current staff there is just incredible.
Right.
And let's see what else they're doing.
Any time left for fun, Greg?
Well, I have two golden doodles, and they're my
They're a full-time job.
full-time job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in, taking time.
thank you,
to talk
Suzanne.
with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And over and out from Suzanne Moore.